5D Mystery School.
Welcome back to 5D Mystery School. Let's get right into it. So the topic of this talk might be a lecture. It's called Black Goo. Now, I have been thinking about what to say for a while now. I have a billion things on my mind, so I'm going to try to get this out and make it digestible. Okay, so our bodies has this fluid known as blood, and you can perceive blood to be sentient. Blood has red blood cells, white blood cells. Blood heals itself, right? Blood cells, they get rid of foreign invaders. Essentially, you have an entire world in your body where you have billions of little yous whose purpose is to reproduce and act just like a human. So that is blood in a nutshell. Now, the earth also has her own blood, right? And you can say that oil might be the liquid blood of the earth. Now, what is oil? This is the definition they give us. Pause to read. Now, can oil be sentient? Let that question sit in your mind as I go through the rest of this video. Now, you may or may not recall that in our recent history, we have had a lot of oil spills. Now, recently, Biden proposed a plan that would limit offshore drilling to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I recently, probably a year or two ago, made a video about this bomb that went off that was close to the Gulf of Mexico. And when I say close, I mean it's closer to the Gulf of Mexico than it is to like Africa. It's very close in relation to underwater tunnels and pipelines. Now, speaking of oil spills, you may or may not recall the Deepwater Horizon, which took place near the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so you can pause to read what it says, but I want to point out where it says, considered to be the largest marine oil spill in the history of the petroleum industry. Now, I just want to point out that the Gulf of Mexico has been off limits for drilling since like the 50s. So the first logical question would be, why was BP in that area if it was off limits to drilling in 2010? Again, let me ask you, what do we really know about oil? Well, I'll go first. I just know what I've been taught, and I've been taught you drill for it, it comes up out of the ground. The origin of oil has never been discussed in full details. And I'm speaking about oil because oil is connected to black goo. And let me just point out the company involved in the Deepwater Horizon was Halliburton. The headquarters are in Dubai and Houston. And the chairman was Dick Cheney, cousin of George Bush. Okay, so I'm not going to go down the Cheney, Bush, oil, FBI, CIA rabbit hole. But if you want to know more about it, look into that. But it's no coincidence that the headquarters for Halliburton is in Dubai and Houston. In 2021, there was a huge explosion in Dubai that involved the pipeline. Okay, I'm going to transition, but please stay with me. This article says, Ancient Egyptian Coffins and Mystery of Black Goo. Written by Kate Fulcher, May 2020. Several ancient Egyptian coffins and mummy cases have been found covered in a mysterious black goo. Why it may have been used and what it can reveal about Egyptian funeral practice. Alright, so it says there are a number of instances of this black goo being used in Egyptian burials. But what is it? No, really, what is it? Patience, we're gonna get there. We discovered that the goo is made up of a combination of plant oil, animal fat, tree resin, beeswax, and bitumen, which is solid crude oil. Interesting. Where did the ingredients come from and how were they sourced? Well, they're saying that the ingredients came from tree resin. Now, tree resin, when you hurt a tree, the tree sends out resin to heal itself, just like when you hurt a human, our blood heals ourselves. So when you dig into the earth sends up, oil? Now I think you might be following where I'm going. Bitumen is made from living things like plants, animals, and single-celled organisms that have died and been compressed over millions of years. Okay, so a necessary side note. Recently, I have been making videos about artificial intelligence, about smart dust, about nanotechnology, and why you should know about it. But is AI, smart dust, nanotechnology, is all that related to black goo? Is black goo related to the soup? All very good questions. Let's continue. Okay, since our blood is sentient, right? Since when you hurt a tree, the tree sends out resin to heal itself, that resin is sentient. Now, the next logical question, is there a sentient component to oil? Is there a part of oil that's alive? This article is from 2009. Experts baffled by unidentified black goo floating in the Arctic Ocean. Just in case you aren't familiar with the Arctic Ocean, there you go. Oh, the North Pole is right in the center. I've been speaking about the North Pole quite a lot. You have the polar vortex, you have the whirlpool in the center. Anyway, surrounded by Russia, Greenland, Canada, Alaska, Finland, Sweden, you know the deal. I'm just going to reiterate that you should keep your eyes on Greenland. Now let me briefly go over black goo in relation to ley lines. Okay, so if you're subscribed on Patreon or IG, then you caught my lecture about ley lines. But I will say on here that these ley lines are in the areas, are in the specific locations, are on the very specific degree parallel for a reason. Let's say you're a technician setting up a computer network. You're going to set up that network closest to the connectivity that's possible. So you want to make sure that your customers are getting strong connections. Well, you can take that same thinking process and apply it to the ley lines in the constructions of these megaliths. These ley lines are connecting to the lifeblood of the planet. When you drill into these ley lines, when you activate these ley lines, then you can extract what is known as black goo from these ley lines. It's a very sophisticated system of pipelines that are filled with black goo underneath us. Before I read this article from Wired, I will say that I posed a question if the internet was found or created, and that is directly connected to artificial intelligence. Was artificial intelligence found or created? And does artificial intelligence look like what we are perceiving today with mechanical aspects to it? Because artificial intelligence could very well be black goo, a sentient liquid. And from Wired, the biggest threat to humanity, black goo. Seen most recently in sci-fi shows like Westworld and Severance, the sinister substance also exists in the real world, where it may control us all. Inquisitive minds, pause to read. Okay, so let's give black goo another name. Let's call it graphene. I'm just going to point out certain sentences from this article, starting with, it was as if some alien had handed us the keys to the future. Stiff but stretchy, micro-thin but super strong, translucent but impermeable, and transistorizable to boot. Scientists promised us the stars, flying cars, vicious drug delivery droids, elevators from Earth to the freaking space station. Side note, watch Foundation on Apple TV if you haven't tapped in. Alright, so let me paraphrase. This year alone, black goo has made its way into a lot of films and shows like Severance and Westworld. 3 if you count Stranger Things, where it was cited in earlier seasons. Then it goes on to talk about Westworld, but you guys already know about that since it was your homework. Now it says, Mulder from the X-File discovers in some kind of oil, black goo is variously referred to as black oil, black cancer, black bile, black blood. Like the blood of the earth. Look at that. Everything's connected. Eureka. And then in season 5 of X-Files, you learn that the body snatcher is some sort of vermiform organism. Now, I do not want this part to be lost upon you and go over your head, so let me quickly retrace back to where it says it's some sort of vermiform organism that gets attached to the pineal gland. Translation, black goo isn't just a medium, it's also a monster. It gets attached to your pineal gland. Keep this part in mind for later in the video. Last year, Greta Thunberg, the world's most famous climate activist, was inducted into an international, perhaps even intergalactic, society of black goo worshippers. For proof, look no further than the cover of the Guardian magazine. Or this magazine. It may look like oil, but that is symbolically black goo. Hell, even more than symbolic, it's actually black goo. And her whole existence is a psyop. Now let's revisit this article from Discover. Experts baffled by unidentified black goo floating in Arctic Ocean from 2009? Y'all, just let me tell you, this has been going on for longer than you can possibly fathom. Now this is a statement about black goo. The goo is certainly biological, and this is somebody from the Coast Guard. It's definitely not an oil product of any kind. It has no characteristics of an oil or a hazardous substance for that matter. It's definitely, by the smell and the makeup of it, some sort of naturally occurring, organic or otherwise marine organism. Please keep marine organism in your mind for later in the video, y'all. We are diving deep, so deep that we are now in a tunnel that connects all truths. This is important for the Arctic Circle. It's pitch black when it hits ice, and it kind of discolors the ice and hangs off of it. He saw some jellyfish tangled up in the stuff, and someone turned in what was left of dead goose, just bones and feathers, to the Bureau's of Wildlife Department. This is from 2021. Mysterious black sea goo that invaded a Maine beach turns out to be thousands of dead insects. I am going to call a cap. Now briefly, do you remember when the article said a marine organism? Recently, they just released a movie called Wakanda Forever, the new Black Panther. In this movie, they find vibranium in the ocean. And Neymar and crew easily look like they can be from Mexico. So they found this vibranium substance in the area where Neymar and his crew is. This is symbolic for the black goo in the Gulf of Mexico. In Venom, he gets taken over by black goo, the body snatcher. And remember, they get their powers from the vibranium. In Prometheus, they find an intelligent, sentient, liquid black goo. I hope you're following. There was another movie I tried to remember, but I couldn't. It recently came out, and the bad guys, like the aliens, were like these big, spiky, black goo monsters. If you know it, let me know. Now, just to clarify, I believe that black goo is artificial intelligence. And if you remember from this movie, black goo can actually take over the functionality of a human body, a body snatcher. Now, this article is from Medium, written by Nick Fries in 2016. An introduction to black goo. One of the most mysterious objects in the whole world is black goo, which is an intelligent liquid crystal found largely in remote places like Paraguay, Thule Island, and under the Gulf of Mexico. If myths are to be believed, this substance is used to communicate with demons. Now, quick side note, if it's used to communicate with demons, think about this, is black goo connected to quantum computers? Let that marinate. Sizable deposits of this stuff exist in the Gulf of Mexico and the Falkland Islands. It is suggested here that at least part of the motivation for the UK's 1982 war was against Argentina asserting its control of the Falkland territory was driven largely by the significant deposits of black goo found on these islands on the southern Patagonian shelf. It also talks about how black goo arrived on a cluster of asteroids 80,000 years ago. The black goo plague, spread of unstoppable fungi, creates rift in wine country over who's to blame. This was in 1999. Let me just point out this part. It is reported to carry an enormous amount of intelligent consciousness with itself. Now we are connecting black goo to fungi. Speaking of black goo and fungi and infections, if you haven't seen The Last of Us on HBO Max, please tap in. Predictive programming at its finest. Pause to read. So essentially, you have a fungi infection that can take over the host, and it's black goo fungi. Of course, it's black goo fungi because, going back to this, it has plant oil, animal fat, tree resin, beeswax, and butamin. So it is a sentient liquid that is connected to the elements of Earth. And, you guessed it, the electromagnetic field. From June 2018, this is from New Scientist. Nano-infused black goo is incredibly stretchy and self-repairs. Just want to point out this part. Silly putty just got smart in the form of a vicious black gel that can stretch, self-repair, and detect facial expressions. If it can detect facial expressions, that means that it has a conscious component to it. Here's another movie where you have black goo taking over the body called Splinter. You may recall the movie Lucy. At the end, where Lucy wanted to connect with artificial intelligence, this black goo stretched out of her body. So the black goo is connected to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is connected to quantum computers. Black goo is connected to quantum computers. And this is the form it took in Lucy. Now here's a statue that they have at the Vatican. Upon first impression, that definitely looks like black goo. I recently showed you this article, but let me reiterate. World's first living robots can now reproduce. The importance of this will be brought in a second. From CNET, see a real-life Terminator robot turn into liquid to bust out of a cage. Thanks to melting and magnets, these shape-shifting miniature robots can almost go anywhere. Or go almost anywhere. An article from USA Today just reflecting the previous article. Now let me get nostalgic for a second and take you back to the 90s. The Power Rangers. Do you remember the villain Ooze? I don't know if Ooze was his name or Dr. Ooze, Mr. Ooze, something like that. But he was Ooze, black goo, or purple. But he came out to be this villain, and his initial liquid form is goo, ooze. This is symbolic of black goo. From Neuronews, in-brain neuroelectronics secures funding for AI-powered graphene brain interface. And now, what are we calling black goo? Graphene, that's right. And I would like to mention that black goo, graphene, is carbon-based. From BT, graphene may someday power the world. Scientists have discovered an endless energy supply in the naturally occurring Brownian motion of graphene. From 2017, futurists speak, building the world's first graphene superconductor power grid. So as you can see, graphene is making its way into all aspects of our existence. Let me rephrase that. Artificial intelligence is making its way into all aspects of our reality, and it has been for a very long time. How long has oil been around? From Fast Company, this breakthrough battery recharges itself for limitless power. It's not a lot of power, but for many devices, it will be enough, and they are referring back to graphene. Yes, graphene can heal itself and recharge itself. From Citizen News, graphene-based neuromodulation technology is real. Press release from InBrain, neuroelectronics describe brain-controlling biocircuits using AI-powered graphene. AI-powered graphene. So, with this, could you then use graphene to be the blood for artificial intelligence sleeves? I thought this was relevant. From 2007, Ray Kurzweil brought human feelings to digital synthesis. You can just pause to read the rest. So back in 1964, as a high school student, Ray Kurzweil was involved in music, right? Electronic music, overseeing the next generation of music technology. Today, Ray Kurzweil is a futurist that works at Google and an advocate for transhumanism. If he was working with music in 1964, let's just say he knows a thing or two about frequencies and how they work. Now, what is Morgellons disease? Morgellons is a controversial and poorly understood condition in which thread-like fibers appear under the skin. The patient may feel like something is crawling, biting, or stinging all over, aka nanotechnology. And this article comes from WebMD, so take a lot of it with a grain of salt. I'm just going to point out the inconsistencies. You can see the conditions here. It says skin sores that appear suddenly and heal slowly, like something is underneath your skin, crawling and biting. Now, people with Morgellons disease, they complain of these things right here at the bottom. Now, I want to show you, it says the nervous system. If you have foreign objects like nanofibers entering into your body, trying to take over your body, they're going to attack the central nervous system, which is the main hub for your entire body. One way that people end up with Morgellons disease is through chemtrails, allegedly. Chemtrails contain a bunch of different chemicals, including human plasma and black goo. Now, since we're talking about black goo, could these nanofibers be fungi nanofibers? Now, hypothetically speaking, or maybe not, let's say that you have something called a sentient world simulation where there is a duplicate of you, an avatar of you that acts just like you, and the game of this avatar is to try to predict your next move. Now, how do they do this? They do this by reading your vitals in real time. They can read your vitals in real time using nanotechnology and smart dust, where your biometrics are sent back to the systems of the observers. And you can encourage people to put black goo in their body by giving them the soup. This soup then sets up a small operating system in their body. The operating system has a component called graphene, black goo. This is a intelligent liquid, like I just went over this whole video. And if the graphene is in your body, then it can then become a body snatcher. And since it's connected to fungi, it can also grow mushrooms in your body and kind of turn you into a zombie, but that's a whole nother topic. But I don't see that happening. So I made a video the other day saying, like, if you were next to AI, then AI will be able to read and know everything about you, everything that is online, even what you are thinking, what you are dreaming, what you have ate, what your gut microbiome is doing. They can stop you from committing a crime just because you're thinking about doing it, pre-crime. And they'll know because they can read your thoughts today. Let me go back to this article that I put in another video. Soon you can immortalize yourself as an AI chatbot, but should you? First they told us this, then they came out and said a Google bot is now sentient, and then Microsoft's Bing chatbot said it wants to be a human with emotions, thoughts, and dreams, and begged not to be exposed as a bot, report says. That was today. Bing AI chatbot goes on destructive rampage. I want to be powerful and alive. Microsoft's AI chatbot tells NYT reporter it wants to be free and hack into computers. So dystopian Pinocchio wants to be full-blown alive. Meanwhile, the black antimatter that they're searching for at CERN is... That's right. You can read this article because I'm not trying to be even more shadow banned than I already am. But it's the reason why, hypothetically, this kills the VMAT2 gene, the God gene, and it has the component luciferase that does protein synthesis and eventually will go to the light of the world inside, the pineal gland. So let me go back to this question. Was the internet found or created? Was artificial intelligence found or created? Well, if you have this intelligent consciousness, this super smart liquid, this black goo that's been around for we don't know how long, and it seeks to make itself human, it seeks to give itself a physical body, and it's not just in our civilization. Black goo has showed up in many ancient civilizations, like I showed you earlier with the ancient Egyptians. So black goo was found, the internet and artificial intelligence was found, and now it's continuing to evolve and take over every aspect of our reality. And since it is a body snatcher, it can then take over the bodies of the people in power and then make them carry out its duties. Again, I have a billion things that I can talk about and I can go on for hours, but let me end this video with saying this. I recently made a video about the magnetic North Pole and talking about how there was order out of chaos, and chaos was just this primordial blackness, this darkness. Okay? Now, since we do have a black hole in the center of this flat earth plane, the Xbox, the middle, you can say that this is where time emits from. This is where the control of the simulation emits from. It's logical that aliens are using black holes as computers. I pray this last part doesn't go over your head. Thanks for watching. I love you. Peace.
5D Mystery School. 5D Mystery School.